is a great place to work, and also our flexible working policies. And something else that we're doing is introducing a leadership development program and reintroducing after COVID a lot more development of our staff. There was only so much they could do on Zoom and those sorts of things. Everyone got a bit sick of doing online courses and that sort of thing. So Dan's team, the organisational development team, are really ramping up, and there's a lot of interest in that. So staff are getting quite excited about that. So we've sort of got 5 prongs there where we can look at our the staffing side of things. As I highlighted in the report, and I was just talking to Eva Lisa actually, we sort of had a wave of COVID, and then now we're actually just in the last couple of weeks we're starting to get a number of people away. That's ramped up again. It's not just COVID, it's true what the media is saying. It is flu and it's other viruses too. So we're getting a number of absences as well, and one of the reasons being in here today that we're a little bit more spread out and that sort of thing too. So, but I have to say though, around our levels of service, I think the teams have been very agile in keeping our facilities open, and the good news is that we've had record numbers at some of our facilities, such as the zoo, the gardens, and some of our libraries, to be honest, not all of them, but some of them. So we've been a bit lucky that the staff have put in good business continuity plans and actually been able to shuffle people around and keep things going. And I know elected members have probably seen a bit of that as well happening. But so I think we need to be cognisant of that we probably will have more sickness over the winter period, and that we're going to have to be a bit flexible around the way that we're operating too. The other thing, inflation, we had a good discussion about that during the 10-year plan, in which the annual plan, which we finished last Friday and should tick off on the 29th and 30th of June. And where we've landed, I'd have to say myself and the exec team, working with elected members, I think we've landed in a good space, and we feel as comfortable as you can in this ever-changing world, and I don't have a crystal ball, that I think that with the budgets and what we've done around being flexible around our financial strategy, that we're in good shape to actually buffer off most of the effects of what's the circumstances that are coming at us, notwithstanding the fact that we can't read everything that's going to happen, and we don't know what fuel prices will be or other commodity prices will be in 6 months' time. So, but we do have the flexibility to go to the Finance Committee as things change. The one thing we've been cognisant of is levels of service as well. We have the 10-year plan is really a contract with our ratepayers in our community, and if there is any areas where we're deferring work, whether it's capital or operational, we've been careful to prioritise around health and safety, core services, and making sure that if we have to defer anything, if we can move staff around, then it's more of the, I don't like to use the word discretionary, but probably some of the more non-core type things that can wait a little longer to be done, and that we just have to talk to our community about being a little bit more patient around. Some elected members would have seen some rubbish and recycling collections being a bit later and things like that, because our contractors are facing some of the challenges that we've faced as well. One other risk I didn't put in here, and it's probably elected members would have seen the communications from Andrew Parsons in the last week or so, is just around the Three Waters reforms. That's starting to shake into a bit more life again through the legislation being introduced into Parliament this week, and the DIA have actually started putting more staff in place around transition. So we're expecting, I see a bit of a risk as just the workloads on staff coming forward in a number of areas. Yes, we have a team set up, but there is quite a bit of work involved. The problem we have is not knowing the time frames and the the magnitude of the work and what the requests will be and how quick they'll be. So my view is that we probably need to get on the front foot a bit and carry on with Andrew and Stephen and the team actually getting quite prepared for that. I think some of that was traversed in some of the workshops yesterday, which unfortunately I couldn't make. So that probably is a risk and an opportunity going forward. And my view is that if the legislation continues working through the way it is, then we probably need to get on the front foot and actually just look at how we can make sure that we get the best result possible for Hamilton going forward, whilst we look after our staff and our community as well. So happy to answer any questions.
Thank you for that, Lance. I've got 3 questions here. I'll start with Councillor Bunton.
Thank you, Chair. Lance, I just want to pass on my congratulations as Chair of Community to the pool staff who narrowly averted losing a major meet one weekend recently due to the second wave of COVID coming through. But what came out of that was potentially an opportunity where it wasn't so much the lifeguards and the, with greatest respect, the lower skilled group that got it, was the more specialist staff that were pretty much wiped out. And a discussion came up about the idea of potentially training other staff within the organisation to be available for some of that specialty work. And I figured with an organisation the size of ours, maybe, and I know that we're stretched, but maybe there is that opportunity to upskill some of our people from different departments in different areas and have them on standby should they be needed. Is that something that's going through, and maybe it's a question for Dan down the track, but is that something that's being considered? We think we do.
Look, the answer is yes. So we, and through the whole COVID period over the last 2 years, and David's led this through our incident management team, our IMT, is actually reviewing our business continuity plans.
Yep.
And then how can we get a little bit innovative and creative around that? And I know Leanne in the visitor destinations area has looked at, can a customer service person at the zoo, pop down to the gardens if they're short staff and all that sort of thing. So there's some simple fixes, probably the more technical things probably take a little bit longer. That will be looked at through our business continuity plans, and it's almost a little bit like getting people trained for civil defence. How can we get our people to become multi-skilled so they can jump in and through refreshers is actually be capable to go and help operate Waterworld or Gallagher Aquatic Centre or something like that. So the simple answer to your question is yes. There'll be some short-term stuff we can do, but there'll also be some longer-term things that we'd have to put in place for that too, to make sure that people are trained appropriately.
Because I think in the long term it will be a hell of a lot cheaper rather than getting specialists in if we need to on a consultant basis. Have we put enough resource in from a governance group to enable that extra training or that extra time in the meantime?
Yeah, I'm confident with our training budgets and also just the way that we do review those business continuity plans and the way that we have our team meetings and we call them toolbox meetings especially around health and safety. So I think we've got the mechanisms in place to do that without coming and asking you for more money or resources.
Cool. All right, thank you. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Over to you, Councillor Pesco.
Yeah, thanks, Chair, and thanks, Lance, for your report. My questions are around staff vacancies, and I'm not sure whether that fits with you or with Dan, but I'll ask them of you first. And the first one is around whether we're keeping any statistics of staff resigning for new or existing vacancies created or offered by central government.
I'll probably have to get Dan to answer that. I could talk generically, but the things I hear are generally anecdotally. I haven't seen any data on that, but Dan may well have that from exit interviews. So, Dan, do you want to jump up here?
We do conduct exit interviews and record and collate that data. We wouldn't hold anything specifically around those moving into central government, although we would record if the person leaving offered up where they were going, we would record that information. So it would probably be more ad hoc than reliable data, but certainly we've got exit data and exit interview data that we can call upon if required.
Are you seeing a trend of that happening?
We are seeing relatively high turnover. The reason that is coming through in terms of main themes is around lifestyle, remuneration, and often they're leaving local government and going into private sector.
Okay.
So we are seeing some
Okay.
of those things.
So those that might be going to central government, are they being offered significantly higher salaries than council can afford?
Yeah, anecdotally, we are hearing
Yep. Okay.
significant increases being offered.
Okay.
What we are doing as well is trying to retain key staff, but they're receiving multiple offers and multiple counter offers. So it's very difficult for us to actually retain people.
Yeah,
So, yeah.
I'm
it's,
sympathetic, I know what's going on, yeah.
Yeah.
Can I just say one other thing, Councillor Rob? Talking to a number of government departments in Wellington, there's a bit of a merry-go-round going in Wellington too. So,
Yeah,
you know, like I talked about Heather Shotter, who's in charge of the transition unit for Three Waters reform. A lot of the DIA staff they had involved in waters reform that Andrew and Stephen and others were dealing with 4 months ago have gone to other government departments. So there's actually a bit of a merry-go-round going on in Wellington too, and you've probably seen some of the reasons for that in the media as well around wage freezes and things like that, and how true what the media says, I'm not sure, but there is a lot of people moving around public service, but there's also people moving from public service to private enterprise, and you know, my understanding is that you know, the market is hot and everyone's getting quite assertive around trying to attract the best people.
yeah. One last question, Chair. Are we recruiting with agencies on the basis that the border will, or should, or may, reopen on the 31st of July, and that there may be opportunities to recruit personnel who want to come and work here in New Zealand?
Migrant labour is definitely a pipeline, particularly for certain types of roles. We're trying to reduce our reliance on agencies and manage recruitment internally. But certainly we do reach out to agencies where there is a priority or a role priority and they have a specialised skill set in that. The good thing that we recently were able to get over the line was our accreditation around immigration. So we've been able to achieve that as well. So it does give us that opportunity should we need to do that.
So is there any fear of us missing out? You know, this same thing that existed in the real estate industry a few months ago, for us missing out on recruiting good staff either within New Zealand or from overseas?
No, look, I think it's certainly a very competitive environment. I think we're doing everything we can to compete with other organisations. Lance, mentioned health insurance. We're doing a lot of other proactive initiatives and programs to really position council as a great place to work, and we'll continue to do that. So look, I don't believe that we're missing out. I think we're doing everything we possibly can alongside other organisations who are in the same boat, competing for talent. There's a scarcity of capability, and we're doing our best.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Dan.
Thanks, Chair.
Right, next question is for Councillor McPherson.
Thanks, Chair Kieran. Look, good discussion, which touched on my points about the staffing issues. Appreciate those points. Lance, you've mentioned it as well, Dan, the Three Waters situation and the transition period we're about to start entering, and they've already started pinching our staff for that as well, as we know. It seems to me that that's going to be quite a big risk that we, if I were in the transition unit and seeing the DIA staff falling like flies or scarpering like flies being sort of brushed away or something to other government departments and elsewhere, I'd be trying to headhunt some of the experienced people like those that we've still got left in our council and one or two others like ours. I mean,
I don't want to talk about individuals, of course, but it seems that that's a risk in its own right. You know, just we've got good experience, but how the hell are we going to hold on to it with the sort of pressures you're talking about, given that in the next 2 years there's going to be all this transitional work happening with people, they're going to require expertise that they clearly don't have at the moment down there?
Yeah, I agree with you. And the discussions that Andrew and basically councils and CEs are having with the transition unit and what was touched on before around immigration policies is some of the commentators are saying that, you know, the 4 entities, if and when they're set up, will need probably even more resource than what's available in New Zealand at different levels, because they're going to be big entities, and you're right, there is a big risk there. So what we've been doing, without naming individuals either, and you probably know who that so what we're doing is actually talking to our people and making sure that we keep close, have those conversations, make sure that they feel valued, and also point out the range of skills they have that can be applied to a lot of different things in council, because, you know, people do get worried about change and transfers and all that sort of thing, even though the legislation says they're protected in that. And I saw it in the Auckland transition, you know, there's a lot of churn and a lot of uncertainty. So what we're doing, and I know Eva Lisa and some of the other GMs have been spending a lot of time talking to those key people, and do that on a weekly and daily basis, so that they are well informed, but also they know that they are held in high regard. And we're doing some other things which I won't go into the detail of that for employment relation reasons, but we're doing some other things to actually make sure that as much as we can is to retain those people in the organisation, because they do have transferable skills.
Yeah.
But the reality is, Councillor Dave, that you know, some people will be looking at their own careers and those sorts of things, and unfortunately they might, you know, it might be a bit risky to go and do a 1 or 2 year contract for the transition agency, but they might be looking at the bigger picture going forward. We're also outside of that, and I know Chris has had it in his area around project managers. Sometimes it's a bit circular. People will go away, get some more experience, and they'll come back, you know, in 3 or 4 years' time. So we actually work with other councils around learning and development programs, mentoring, coaching, that sort of thing, so that they're not lost to the sector. And people do tend to move around local government a bit, and they go to Waipa and they come back to Hamilton, and then go to Waikato and come back again. A couple of our staff have had more comebacks than Muhammad Ali, so there is, but that's a bit of a longer game. So we've got to play the short term game as well as the longer game, and I think that's a challenge for everyone going forward. So we're doing as much as we can. I think it will be challenging, but we'll keep council up to date on that. And if we end up in a crisis situation, you'll be the first to know.
Okay, thank you.
Oh, second after you, I think. I had another question relating to another area of staffing, which is sort of, you touched on in some ways with the sickness sort of issues we're facing at the moment. I've noticed, and I hope I don't embarrass any of the individuals here in this room, that the pressure that governance is under at the moment, and it's being handled at the moment, but we've got elections coming up, and I know from my 8 previous elections that the people that get it in the neck, staff-wise, are always the governance team here. So in the next, it started already, but it's going to really ramp up in the next month or so, and then for 3 months they're going to be under the hammer with all sorts of complaints about election signs and Bunty not doing the right thing in the election campaign or whatever. Yeah, that's right. Yeah, it's going to put a lot of pressure on them, and it's not like it's a regular part, it's a once every 3 years part, so I'm wondering if we have enough support / resource in that area just in the next few months.
Yep, so what I'll be doing with David and Mish is we'll be having a look at that and just making sure that if we need to, we'll be seconding some people to help. And you're right, we have, you know, as pointed out before, we do have vacancies, people coming and going, even in that area, and we also do have people going down with sickness, so it's part of our business continuity. You're right around the election, we sort of have that, you know, every 3 years we have that period, and then even after that there's quite a bit of work and induction of new elected members and things like that. So we're well aware of that. We'd probably look at secondments first, people who sort of know the organisation, rather than trying to pull someone from outside on a short-term contract or something like that. So that's what we'll be looking at.
Yep. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Oh, and look, we're open
Councillor.
to feedback on that too. So, and Councillor Dave, you flicked me some feedback. I appreciate that. So, if there's any other elected members, appreciate that feedback too.
Councillor Van Osden.
Thank you. I think I'll take you up on that offer around feedback. We've got a change in the system that we're going to be using in this next election, and so it's really important that the public understand that. So I'll be keen to understand, you know, what we'll be doing to ensure that the public are aware of that, but I can talk offline with you around that.
TV1 did a really good item the other night about East TV.
And I shared it.
Yeah.
It was a great item, actually, and I thought it explained it really well. Yeah, yeah. However, that's not my question, and I apologise, Chair. You mentioned sicknesses and the peaks and troughs of that. I just would be interested in your commentary around change in attitudes and behaviours in managing sick leave and absences, and I guess specifically about it being okay to be at work if you are sick.
Look, I think COVID has changed that completely. Just the way we work, you know, mixture between work, home and office, and you know, other sites and that sort of thing. What we've seen, and Dan will probably talk about this, and Marie in their health and safety report, is you used to see people coming in with a heavy cold soldiering on, and you know, sneezing and spluttering and all that sort of. You don't see that anymore. I think the hygiene type things, I think everyone's very cognizant of those sorts of things. And if people are like that, they tend to, you know, contact their manager and work from home. Obviously, you don't. On the other hand, you don't want people working from home who are, like, you know, really sick and should be in bed. So I'd say our leaders over the last 2 years have become very much having more regular conversations with every individual in their team. So I think that's been a real positive as well. So in a whole bunch of ways. So and last year our engagement stayed pretty much the same, which I thought it actually would decrease by 5 or 6 points. And Dan and I had a bet on that, and I probably owe him a beer actually, but I thought it would have declined somewhat. So there's been some positives as well. So you're right, yeah, there's behavioural change.
I think if I could just add as well, we've continued to promote, you know, if you're feeling unwell, you know, stay at home. And I think that, you know, over the last 2 years that message has, you know, become sort of part of our, you know, approach to wellness and staying well. And yeah, I'd agree with everything that Lance said. I think, you know, people are more accepting. I think leaders are much more sort of mature in terms of their approach. And working with staff to ensure that they stay away. And look, we've got good leave provisions and those things as well that support people, you know, recouping and getting well. So all those things, you know, add to a really good positive culture.
Thank you for that, and thanks for mentioning the leave provisions. Do we track the status of that on an ongoing basis, year to year?
Yeah.
Yep.
Not just on an employee basis, but you know, on a wider council.
Yeah, we do track what we call unplanned absences. Certainly over the last 2 years, it's been distorted somewhat with you know, with COVID. But we've been fortunate, we've been able to tap into those wider leave provisions centrally where people have contracted the virus. But yes, we do track absenteeism or unplanned absence, as we call it.
Okay.
And there's
And
a bit
also
more of a relaxed...
excessive annual leave as well.
Right,
And
yeah.
Tracy's the person who talks to me about that regularly.
I'm just
Thank you.
just aware of the time. We're at 10 o'clock. We've got until 1 o'clock. If there aren't any further questions on this report, I see that the recommendation is that the committee receives a report. I'll move that. Thank you for seconding, Bruce. All of those in favour? Right. Against? Carried. Right, so I should have actually outlined at the beginning of the, thank you, Lance, the beginning of the meeting, the focus areas for our short time. So we've got the year-end accounting issues paper and the audit plan, which need to be dealt with obviously before year-end. And we've got the insurance renewal paper. I want to spend plenty of time in PX to cover the cyber paper. So that's what I see the focus areas for today. As always, I'll ask that staff and committee members try and consider the elevation of the discussions and keep discussions concise enough to allow us to get through the full agenda. Right, so our next agenda item is safety and wellness report. So I'll invite Dan back to the table. Thank you. Right, so you can, of course, take the paper as read. Are there any high-level items you'd like to highlight for the committee?
We'd just like to highlight the good progress and the momentum in terms of our continuous improvement programs around safety, health and wellbeing, and just particularly the progress around the safety management system, Project Dora, which we anticipate going live later in June this month. The work that's been done around contractor management, which is a big program and piece of work, and we look forward to the opportunity to really tighten up the work that we're doing around our critical risks. So our program is well laid out, and I just wanted to also, lastly, just to acknowledge the support that we are getting from the organisation and our business partners working out in the field. And, you know, there's really good collaboration and work that is ongoing in those areas. And that makes our job and Marie's job and the safety and wellbeing teams work much easier. We've got that support. Thank you.
Sounds like a good positive culture there, so that's good to hear that feedback. Cool. Okay, look, there's one question, one person in the question list. That's Bruce. I'll hand over to you.
Thanks, Karen. Report, guys, and again, I'm really impressed the way we've picked, you know, this has changed. Dan, just one question from me primarily, which is around, I'm looking at paragraph 8, so it's the work streams. As you've said, you're making good progress. Always interested when we possibly have an older review, I could be wrong, the Safe Plus review, we're at 60% status. And obviously it says you're consolidating. Is there any particular risk out of that Safe Plus review that we haven't addressed but we should be aware of?
No, look, I don't believe so. The Safe Plus report, the final report we got back in October, November 2020, and certainly the work that we've been doing has been focused on some of those recommendations, particularly around improved reporting, risk management, but also with the introduction of Aura later this month, that will address some of those outstanding recommendations. So we're confident that there are no underlying risks or issues that were identified in that report that we haven't picked up.
Okay, look, I've got a few questions. Good report, thank you. Now, my first question is on page 29. So this is the State of Safety Review and where we're at with progress in that gap analysis. And off to the right, I see that there are a few areas where there hasn't been any change since the last our last report. And I'm just wondering, what is the problem there? Are those areas sufficiently supported to enable implementation of those recommendations?
Look, I'll hand over to Marie, who's much more closer to that information than I am, but she'd be placed to answer that.
Welcome, Marie.
Hi, good morning. So you'll see actually the heat map, we've changed the layout of it, and there are a number of business units that have reached and completed a number of the recommendations, and you'll see on the right-hand side that change in terms of the increase. I think we have to acknowledge that COVID has interrupted a lot of what can be done or could be done within the last 6 or 7 months with regards to the recommendations. Our business partners have been aligned to specific business units. So particularly I look at community on the heat map here, and they're our largest business unit. And we've only just started to get back to work and been able to get out into the business within the last 4 to 6 weeks. So a big focus now is for the business partners to make sure that they're doing that, getting alongside the business units to understand why the recommendations haven't been done, or how can we support them to make sure that we get them completed.
Okay. And when is the redo of that audit? When are you anticipating that?
The safety reset or the safety review, we will pick up internally through our own assurance pillar. The external audits that we are considering and factoring in will be a redo of the Safe Plus audit, but we're just factoring in the timing and when best to do that. I mention that because with Aura being introduced shortly, that will take some time, because it's not only is it a new system, but it's a behavioural and a cultural change in terms of how we want to engage with that new platform. So that will take some time to bed in, and remembering that some of the recommendations were around that reset. So, but certainly external audits will be part of our wider assurance pillar, but we will continue to do the internal assurance as well through that period.
Okay, thank you. Is a question from Mangai, Jodine?
Kia ora tātou. My question is in relation to paragraph 13 of the report, page 18 of board books, and it talks about the trends identified from the 3 Waipa civil service strikes, and there was going to be an update. So is there another update, or everything is found within the papers?
No, look, what we'd like to do is provide a verbal update. We've invited Dave Heatley, and also Eva Lisa will also be able to talk to that as well when you're ready to move into that section.
Okay. Let's do that now.
Great.
Yeah.
Hi everybody, my name's Dave Heatley. I'm from the Capital Delivery.
I think you'll need to.
Hello everybody, Dave Heatley from Capital Projects team.
Welcome.
I'm responsible for delivering most of this infrastructure work that the incidents occurred on. The service strikes have been with the same contractor as well. So they've undertaken 2 water main contracts, one the bulk water main to Newcastle, and the other one is our normal water main reticulation renewal contract. The contractor themselves are very conscientious and take it very seriously about these events. And I think it's reflected through in this meeting as well, where everybody's concerned about notifiable events. In this case, notifiable to us is something that's can cause death, cause injury, serious. So it's gas and power cables. So the contractor does due diligence. They're very conscientious. They get the plans. And the overview from the request coming from the meeting last time was that they investigate why the 3 incidents occurred and what was the commonality between the 3 events. In essence, I think it's the unknown, what's under the surface. It's we see the service plans, we get them to locate the services, but at the end of the day, there's a lot of unknown that are underground, and we will always suffer the risk of not knowing what we don't know. And the main process that we do follow is that we go slower than we've done before. We try to get assurance that whatever's in there is known, and that when we pick an alignment for a service that we avoid everything that's in there. The instance that we had, and the example was the hydro excavating, which is the least impact methodology they could use. They still removed a lateral service off a main. So it was to do with the age of the main, and they still blew the service off. So this is hydro excavation, which is blowing high pressure water, sucking the material out, and not digging, not physically making a hole in the ground apart from the hydro excavation process. So that was unavoidable, but they followed due process. They shut the job down. They notified WorkSafe, they notified the gas company, they did all due process, they've done a good thorough report of what they did, and they've identified that the concentration of services, the depth of services, the age of services, the unknown services that people don't take ownership for, and they've provided those as being what they're looking out for in all situations when they're trying to put a new service in the ground.
Okay. Now, there may have been some miscommunication, but my understanding from our discussions at our last meeting, we have received reports on the various strikes, but the committee was wanting to understand the frequency of notifiable events coming from Waipa Civil, and whether that was proportionate to the amount of work that they do for the council, or whether there are particular trends there that we need to be aware of.
Yeah, I don't think there's any higher number than expected. I don't think we have an expectation in the first instance. We probably want 0 strikes in the first case, and when we do hit the services, there's no highlight to say it's more regular or more not. I don't know about Murphy's Law, but things happen in threes, and then you don't have anything for a while, and then they happen again. It's that random. There's no real trend. We do hit services, so we have a zero policy.
There's no doubt that there is a trend of service strikes, and that's why the committee is looking to drill down further, and in particular whether there are any issues or trends within that. Are you aware of any patterns in these?
Yeah, the contractor's just got new technology, a new software package where they're, on one of these jobs where the gas strike occurred, they're starting to use this technology to monitor and track trends. Historically, it's come to our health and safety department, and we've tried to look at the common trends through the lot. And it's probably something that's going to be a regular event here where we can show trends that are happening actually in the workplace through this software that we're going to be getting reports from the contractor with.
Okay. Did you have any further questions? No? Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
I would just note that this is an issue that the committee has queried for the last probably 2 meetings, at least once before, and I think that it would be useful to have some empirical evidence on this, some data, rather than general discussion. Can I request that we put on an action list that there is some written reporting on this matter at the next meeting, and Dan, perhaps I could take that offline with you so that we can be clear on the information that the committee's requesting.
Yeah, no, look, we're happy to do that. What I could add is that Waipa Civil would have a high percentage of work allocated to them. So they would do a majority of our excavation work. What we will do is get that information and then represent that against the number of notifiables so that we've got some benchmarks that we can work from. But we'll pick up an action and get that done.
Thank you. Okay, I don't have any other members waiting for questions, but I do have some more of my own. You mentioned about the business partners getting back out into the business now that they're able to with COVID, and I think in your report you mentioned, the re-establishment of site visits. What sort of refresher training and training on safety observations, that sort of thing, do you provide to help, help those site visits be more effective?
The team of business partners only came into the business August, September last year, and unfortunately we went into lockdown. So we're only just getting back out there. So we are now actually just putting a lot of those procedures in place. We've currently got Vault, and our business partners can, when they are now going out to the business unit, any observations they make and anything that needs to be looked at and controlled. They will put the observation into Vault, and then it will be allocated back through to the business unit itself, and then the business partner will support the business unit in making sure that things are done.
Look, I'd just also add, I spoke earlier about the work that we're looking to ramp up around critical risks. And look, we're partnering with the Coachio Group, who provide facilitation and help us do that. That will be a learning exercise as well for those employees and participants through the critical risk evaluation. And so we'd look to use that as part of a learning event as well. But certainly there are other training, health and safety training that we provide, and look, that's part of our approach and plan for the upcoming performance year.
Yeah, enhancing those safety conversations throughout the organisation, I think, is key to build on that cultural shift momentum that you recognised at the beginning of your report.
I think what's important for the business partners is actually getting out and knowing and understanding the tasks that are done and having those conversations with people to then really know what is being done in order to support.
Yeah, great. And you also mentioned the annual Workwell survey. So I think that's being analysed at the moment, but were there any red flags with regards to health, safety and wellness coming out of that survey that the committee should be aware of?
Look, there wasn't anything that stood out. As we mentioned, we're just currently collating and pulling together those insights which we'll be able to present at the next committee meeting. What I could provide is that, look, we had a relatively low uptake or participation rate, around 27%, which is, we would always like a stronger participation. We did see an increase in people's overall well-being, which is around 88%. So people's general well-being, or I guess health, they rated 88%, which was up from the previous survey. So yeah, we will be in a position to be able to provide those insights at the next meeting. So, but nothing that we would be concerned about.
That's great, thank you. Look, it's good to see the progression, not only in the reporting to the committee, but obviously, within the culture of the organisation. It was great to see the Safety Governance Board minutes there, and there's obviously some really valuable conversations happening at that level. So well done, thank you for your time today.
Great, thank you.
So the recommendation is that the committee receives the report.
Oh, there's a question.
Oh, sorry.
I just wanted to pick up on a point that you were saying, and it relates to what we were talking about yesterday about Whakaari White Island, that when our business partners are going out into our business, that they're focusing not on just the slips, trips and falls, but they're focusing on that they're on an active volcano. So just want to solidify that.
Yeah, really good point, thank you. You've mentioned the critical risk, safety risk work that you're doing, and hopefully a focus on those critical safety risks will avoid that very scenario. Yeah, thank you. Right, so look, I should just double check that there's nobody on Zoom. You will let me know if there are questions from Zoom, thank you, because I can't see them here. Right, so the recommendation is that the committee receives the report and notes that council will receive a copy of the report. I'll move that. Seconder, thank you. Councillor Mark. All of those in favour? Against? Carried.
The resolution?
No, we don't need that. It's staff action.
Thank you.
Okay, let's move to the risk report. Page 30 of Diligent, I'm hoping. Yes, there we go. Welcome, Mish. As always, I'll hand it over to you to highlight the main points of the report, and then I'll open it up for questions.
Thank you. We'd like to take the report as largely read. I'd just like to note that we have had the workshop yesterday looking at the review of the strategic risks, and that will be reflected, as noted by David, in the September meeting, along with the review of the mitigations and treatment plans. The main issues have been highlighted in the executive summary of the report, which is again looking at the reform agenda, which is quite significant, and it's detailed further in the risks themselves. And we had the opportunity yesterday to look at Three Waters as an example. And the other one, which is obviously a recurring theme and has been touched on by our CE, is SR7, so that's the cost escalation and shortage of key external resources. So, Madam Chair, if there are any questions, we do have some of our staff on Zoom who will be able to respond if needed.
Thank you. And yes, I do note that we did spend some time on each of these risks yesterday at the workshop, and at the next committee meeting we can expect an updated risk register. There is a question from Bruce.
Yes, thank you, Chair. Yes, and I just to reinforce that comment, the summary table, attachment 1 on page 40, I wondered whether the arrows going horizontally were right. I thought after yesterday, I suspect you might come back with some going up, but that's neither here nor there. Look, just I had 3 questions, Mish. One was answered by Lance earlier before about level of service risk, as I see it, around deferrals, and I won't go there. 2 really minor ones. I was interested in SR9. We discussed that at some length yesterday around climate change. I was just wondering whether our climate change strategy also means that we will be doing some form of reporting through our annual report.
I think we've got Sean.
Is somebody able to help me with that?
And actually, I will just add to that question, because I had the same question, and also I was just wondering how our annual report disclosures will interact with the annual climate change disclosure report,
exactly.
which reading will be a separate document, but it would be good to get some clarity on that.
We do have climate change in your work program for the September meeting as well, so there will be an opportunity to look at that aspect in a bit more detail. But Sean's on Zoom, so I'll hand over to him.
Yeah, so the intention was that climate, the climate report would be a separate report to the annual report, but I'm just probably a question for Tracy, I think, in terms of whether we could incorporate that. I think it would still be a separate report, but we may be sort of able to reference it into the annual report for the next annual report.
Okay, I'll leave it for, I'll park Tracy's response for the, when we deal with the annual accounting issues, if that suits you, Tracy. Yeah.
Kieran, if it's okay, I only had one other minor question, which was, there's also emerging issues there. It didn't seem like they were big. I noticed one was the city water supply. Just trucking along, there's no big issue, no red flags there?
So if I can answer through the chair, no, there's no
issue.
emergent.
Great, good, thank you.
Issues at the moment.
Thanks, Kieran.
Great. Okay, Councillor Rob.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. I've got a couple of questions that weren't covered off yesterday. One is in paragraph 19 on the RMA changes. Is there a risk that the increased infrastructure required for more density housing, which is being levelled at us by central government, may not be affordable to council within its current rating and debt structure, potentially resulting in us having potentially that the new bills may be poorly supported and the services are at risk of failure?
I think Grant should be online. He's filling in for Blair at the moment. Grant Kettle.
Grant Kettle is online, but Hannah may be able to answer.
Yep.
I'm able to answer if that helps.
Thanks.
Yeah, in terms of the infrastructure requirements to support densification, we've been advocating back to central government throughout the development of the future legislation that that hasn't been addressed. There are no new funding sources, and we've been quite strong in our feedback that infrastructure is the main constraint for us to be able to give effect to that. So that is still a discussion in progress, but yes, I would agree that that is a risk we've been highlighting to central government.
So is this another area that we should be hounding the ministers directly on, in addition to the three waters that we talked about at the workshop yesterday?
We're definitely raising it through the RM discussions that we're having directly with MFE, and politically, I understand those are starting to happen as well, but yes, that would be something we need to keep raising.
Thank you. And my last question, Chair, is just on local government reform. And I have raised this before, but not at this particular meeting, that we did have a chance to meet with the panel. Unfortunately, it was on Zoom, and we did not have the opportunity to discuss all 5 of the areas in the reform that the panel were doing their roadshow around. And I have previously asked for a further opportunity to meet with that panel, and I'm as yet I haven't had an answer from anybody as to whether that is likely to occur. But one of the areas that we didn't talk about was the financial aspects of the reform, and I think that's a major one that simply we didn't have the time to discuss that.
And we heard yesterday that that's very much evolving.
Well, yeah, except we did ask that the panel might come back and work through those remaining questions, but that is currently unanswered, and I'm just a little bit worried that the panel may release its report to government and have left us off the list, and maybe other councils off the list, in terms of providing feedback on that.
Okay.
So I'm not sure whether we will resolve that today, but it is really a concern to me that we've got major reform and we're not getting an opportunity to voice our particular views on that.
Yeah.
We've just got Sean again, who I think wants to perhaps speak to that one.
Yeah, if I may, through the chair, it's just a comment that we currently have drafting the submission to go back to the government on that local government reform. So that will be circulated to elected members shortly as a draft, and I think reflecting the point that you've made, there, Councillor Rob, we will incorporate that into the draft submission. But there will be an opportunity for you to have input and feedback on that draft submission before that is due to go to the 30th of June council meeting to approve that submission. So it's the sort of period between now and then to finalise what that submission looks like.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. One last question from Mangai. Jodine.
Oh, kia ora. I just wanted to reiterate another point from yesterday about deeper dives into some of the strategic risks, and so that we get assurance that the mitigations that are in place are robust and that the residual risk levels are accurate. And I'm sorry, Murray, I'm going to bring it up again because I still look at strategic risk 4 and disagree that the residual likelihood of a cyber attack is possible. Kia ora.
Thank you. And we can pick that conversation up more with the cyber paper and PX. Right, if there aren't any further questions on that paper, the recommendation is that the committee receives the report and notes that the report will, notes that council will receive a copy of the report. I'll move that. Can I have a seconder? Thank you. Councillor Maxine. All of those in favour? Against? Carried. Thank you. Right, we'll move to PwC and HCC internal audit update on page 78. And I'll welcome PwC and Morva to the table. Right. Welcome. Right, as usual, please take the report as read, but highlight any matters that you would like to draw to our attention.
Brilliant, thanks Karen. The report includes a summary of our proposed internal audit plan for the 2022-23 year and then the following 2 years. This report was tabled in draft at the last meeting. There's been some minor changes to it and largely just in the timing of reviews to take in some of the feedback from the last session. The one other change you will see in it is the inclusion of Morva's review plan as well, so you can have a sort of full picture of the full internal audit coverage for the year. In terms of updates, the completed cyber report will be in the PX session later, and we've commenced the scoping discussions around business continuity planning.
Great, thank you. And as you say, we have, it's not the first time we've seen this. I think I noted at the last meeting that was a good, robust process in developing the areas to go into the plan, and it's good to see how that now meshes with our internal resource. I don't think we've got any questions on this paper. So if there aren't any further questions, the recommendation is that we receive the report and approve the final combined internal audit plan for PwC and Hamilton City Council. I'll move that. Can I have a seconder? Thank you, Jaylene. All of those in favour? Against? Carried. Thank you very much. We now have the annual pre-renewal insurance report. Who's going to take us through that?
Julia.
Julia. Welcome, Julia.
Hi, thank you.
And Matthew.
All right. Thank you. So my name's Julia Copard. I'm the insurance lead for Council, and with me is also Matthew Wilson from Aon, Client Relationship Manager for Local Government Risk Practice. This is a new report for this committee. We bring the annual insurance report at the end of each year following the renewal of our insurances, and it was asked last year to provide an update on our approach and market conditions, etc., to this committee. So the report provides an overview of our approach and progress, and also provides an update on the insurance activity and the progress that we're making in that space. So I will take the report as read and move to any questions for myself or Matthew.
Thank you. I just wonder if it would be useful just to go over those items that are yet to be considered. I'm thinking about, the motor vehicle deductibles, the professional indemnity and the likes. Do you want to just take us through those quickly?
Yeah, sure. So in terms of the cover that we take for commercial motor, which is discussed in point 16, so point 19, sorry. So we carry a very low deductible across council for our fleet, and as we move away from the traditional kind of ownership of all our fleet and how we approach there, we're just looking at carrying a higher deductible in that space. As Matthew will always tell us, the lowest part of our insurance premium is the most expensive, and we have quite good service relationships, etc., in that space. So we are already set up to manage those losses ourselves, and so it would be a cost-effective option for us to move forward in that space.
And Aon are reviewing the statutory liability cover?
Yes, correct. In preparation for the 1 November renewal, when we will be giving some options as to adequacy. Yep. That's just in line with market trends that we are seeing in terms of possible WorkSafe issues and where that is going.
Right, okay. And you're also looking into environmental cover for closed landfills?
Correct.
Okay, thank you. I've got 2 questions here. Bruce?
Yeah,
not so bad, Bruce, yourself.
Just to pick up on the environmental cover, can you explain it a bit more? It's the first time I've seen that being suggested. Is this a new product line, or is it something that councils are having to consider much?
It's not a new product line per se. Sorry if I don't follow the appropriate
No,
protocol.
you're fine.
It's not a new product line per se. They have been around for a few years, most notably in Australia. A traditional public liability insurance policy will provide cover for contamination. However, it has to be as a result of a sudden event. A traditional public liability policy is also all about third-party costs, not your costs. An environmental impairment policy does not have the sudden and accidental around it, so it can be a slow operating process, and the example was the methane in a landfill site, for example. And it also will allow cover for elements of first-party costs, clean-up costs and those sort of things. I will be quite frank with you, the premiums used to be very expensive. The market has changed somewhat, and we will be investigating whether there is a cost benefit to you to pursue that type of insurance, taking into account what you have, what the possible exposures are, and what the appetite is within the organisation.
Yeah, and I presume that also take into account the existing provisioning we have for post-closure landfill costs. Yeah,
correct.
Gotcha. Okay, look, just a couple of other things then, Matthew. One was, I was just noting, just thinking about infrastructure placement. I presume our current revaluation cycle has probably also put the infrastructure price substantially higher.
The price or the value?
Well, sorry, the value, I should say. Good point.
We are
It might have an impact on price though as well.
That is something we're working on. Do you want to?
Yeah, so we haven't got the final values through from the valuation in terms of putting them into the insurance renewal, so we are expecting that they will be slightly higher, and that will be taken, and then that will be added to any market increase based on that value, which Aon are indicating is potentially in the provision of.
Well, in terms of a general market commentary, if I may, our expectation is that we will be talking about low single-digit increases again. In Julia's comments around the market on a global perspective, there is an increase in capacity in the marketplace currently. For good, well-managed risks, there is also a bit of competition in the marketplace, and I would put Hamilton in that category, certainly, and I said this at a previous one of these, the work that Julia and the team have done in getting that quality data together has been exceptional. It can always be improved, and it's an iterative process, so we're doing that. Aon will be visiting London again this year. We're going up end of August, beginning of September, and presenting to the markets directly. We are taking a representative from the Waikato group with us. You cannot underestimate the value for money that is involved in that process. The fact that we were able to continue with VC presentations over the last couple of years was built on the fact that historically we have been up to the markets. There are new markets emerging in London. There is an increase in capacity and an increase in capital, so we will also be meeting with those markets.
Okay. Thank you. If you don't have any further questions.
No, I'm fine, thank you, Karen.
Councillor Rob.
Yeah, thank you. And thanks for answering that question. The third biggest premium that we had last year, or the current year, was professional indemnity insurance. What sort of, in terms of the experience of this council and the market generally, how do you see that premium tapping into to next year?
Again, we are hoping that we will be looking at those mid to low digit rating increases. However, one of the questions that the insurers will ask is what is the number of consents that have been given, as that gives an indication of volume of work. So that it's an interesting topic. We have had a commitment from the current insurer of longevity in this space. They want to continue to to participate in this space. Last year, because there had been an easing of sorts of the claims that have been coming through, we were able to get another insurer involved in the placement. So there's multiple insurers involved to give us the capacity. That is a good move because you're spreading the load, as it were. So cautiously optimistic is the way I would say is answer that question. However, depending on the number of consents and the activity, that is one of the drivers to pricing.
Is the pricing also determined, though, on what's happening in the marketplace rather than specific to Hamilton City Council?
No, you are rated on your performance.
Okay.
Yeah, so there are underlying market conditions globally, but in the local authority space that we operate in, it is Hamilton City Council's performance that drives Hamilton City Council's premium.
So when you say low to moderate, is that less than 10% as being the moderate?
Fingers crossed. And I'm not, I don't want to give a definitive answer because we're still 4 or 5 months away. Things could happen, but expectation is around, conservatively, I would say somewhere between 10% is a
that's across the whole portfolio.
No, that's in response to the professional indemnity.
And then what about the other insurances?
Our expectation currently is that the material damage programs, so your infrastructure, your above ground material damage, your business interruption, we are hoping for mid to low single digit increases on those. There is one caveat, and Julia did mention it in the report. Most of the global insurance market has a 1 January to 1 January reinsurance period. Some of the Australian-based insurers go 30 June, 30 June. What that means is the majority of the global market had already fixed their reinsurance costs at the beginning of this year. Some of the Australian ones hadn't. The floods have occurred in Australia, so depending on what the outcome of those...
So that's still got to come through.
Yeah, so we don't know yet what the impact is going to be on those reinsurance costs for the markets, taking into account those floods. That's the only caveat I'd put on that.
Thank you, Chair.
Okay.
If I can just add to that, Chair, it's really important for the committee to understand that the cost to council for insurance is a product of not only price but also the volume. So when we have a look at our capital program and the increase in values that we're insuring, that is a percentage of the total cost to council. So we might be talking about single digits or mid-single digits for some insurance premiums, but we also have that overlaid to a larger portfolio, if you like, of assets.
And I note that there is currently no cyber insurance. Is the strategy to move towards that in the future?
It's not at this stage, and perhaps this can be discussed more in the PX section as well, but the investment is going into the controls and mitigations around that space. And Matthew, I think if you've got any market context around the availability in the cyber market.
I'd say one word to describe the cyber market currently, and that is distressed. Insurers are reducing cover. This is a general statement, this isn't a Hamilton statement. Insurers are reducing cover, they're reducing limits, they're increasing cost significantly. It's a very distressed market at the moment.
Yeah. Okay, it doesn't look like we've got any further questions, so thank you very much, Julia and Matthew. The recommendation is that the committee receives the report and notes progress on the 2022-2023 insurance renewal. I'll move. Can I have a seconder? Thank you, Councillor Robb. All of those in favour? Against? Carried. Thank you.
Thank you.
Right. The next item is the audit plan, but I'm not sure that we've got the auditors here, so I'll just park that agenda item. Tracy, did you want to park also the accounting treatment review paper, or did you want to cover that now and then hopefully they'll be with us? Yeah, let's go to items 13 and 14, and then we'll loop back to 11 and 12, and hopefully Audit New Zealand will be with us. Yep. Okay, so we'll move to page 110 of the papers, and I'll invite Morva to the table. Thank you. Is that okay with you? Welcome, Morva.
Thank you.
Right, as usual, take the paper as read, but what would you like to highlight?
Just, we still have 14 recommendations that are outstanding that Audit New Zealand identified in their report last year. And based on current discussions, 8 of those are ready to be re-audited and others are in various state of flux in terms of their preparedness.
Thank you. I don't have any requests yet. Yes, I do. Bruce.
Look, just one, Morva, and given I should actually have remembers from looking at the accounting policy one, there are 2 in red there, the transport evaluation recommendations from Becca and the transport evaluation use of indices to be reviewed. And I'm just wondering, does that affect any of our work this year on the annual report? And that may be a Tracy question rather than a Morva one.
Yes.
Thank you for that great question. Yes, it does, and that's actually one of the things that when we get into the audit plan, you'll see is one of the top things that Audit New Zealand will be looking at, and in particular that was raised as one of the things. I'll double check. We haven't done transport reevaluations as such this year. We did all the orders ones, but that's not to say that they don't want us to redo the fair value calculation based on the indices.
Yeah, okay. Just a reflection that might change the colour of these, given we'll effectively have to at least deal with the second one. Thank you. Thank you, Kieran.
And Morva, given that the organisational business continuity plan and IT disaster recovery plan has been was raised back in 2015, can you just give us a bit of a summary of the journey there?
Right. Would you like to talk to that, Murray? Sorry? In terms of the journey.
So I understand
I've got. Yes. I mean, okay, I've got some very high-level comments, but IT are in the process of actually reviewing their processes at the moment, and they're also, what they've got here is actually using some external partners to help them to
yes, I understand that work is being scoped, or is it actually out to RFP?
Yes.
But I guess my question is more, what's happened between now and back in 2015? Why is this one so old? Can anybody answer that?
So I think that what's happened is that when the plans were reviewed and they were deemed to be relevant for what we have today, but when we went in and reviewed them against what we need for the future, we deemed that the plans that we have needed further work on them, and so that's why we've gone out to market to get somebody to help us put those plans together. I'm not sure why that prior to my time that no action was taken.
Okay, thank you. And Morva, my understanding is that this register should capture all of the assurance reviews. I note that it doesn't capture the cyber review points, but I'm wondering whether that's because the final report is only with us now.
Correct.
Right.
Yes.
Okay. But you understand that
absolutely
it does capture the rest?
It does, yes. Okay. And I think that's reflected also in the audit plan in terms of the follow-up on certain PwC audits.
Okay, thank you. If there aren't any further questions, the recommendation is that the committee receives the report. I'll move that. Can I have a seconder, please? Thank you, Bruce. All of those in favour? Against? Carried. Thank you, Morva. Right, we'll move to item 14, compliance reporting update on page 113, and I'll ask Mish up to the table. welcome. Is there anything you wanted to highlight to the committee in that report?
I suppose just the usual, which is that there's no instances of fraud or protected disclosures that have been reported. The other thing that I would note is that the protected disclosures bill has passed and become law, but due to the timing, we will report back to the committee at the September meeting on our compliance with the new legislation. One of the other pieces in the work program was the sensitive expenditure policy, which we've attached to this report for review, and I've got Tracy with me as well if there's any questions or feedback on the draft of that policy.
Okay, and you've reviewed the OAG guidance on sensitive expenditure when considering the review of that policy?
Yes, the team has.
Yep, okay, thank you. Look, I'll perhaps... Yes?
Thank you, Chair. The new Protected Disclosures Act, just from your initial reading of it, is it a major reform in the sense that we will need to spend significant resource on it to comply with the new Act, or is it simply some tweaking that will be needed to comply with the new Act?
I would say, Councillor Pascoe, that it is more tweaking for us than anything else. This council already has an excellent process in place with its external officer and the training that it's done. So I don't anticipate it being a huge piece of work.
Okay,
and
thank you.
We can complete it with existing resources.
Thank you.
Thank you. So, look, let's move to the sensitive expenditure policy. Does any of the committee have any feedback items on that policy?
Certainly, Chair, just
Yep.
a couple of comments if that's okay. I was interested about the approach to air points, by the way. I thought it was very pragmatic, allowing air points to be used personally when they've been gained for work. In the long run, I think this has been around the traps with every policy since cows, since they were invented. And I think it is quite a pragmatic one. Obviously, I guess we would be wanting to encourage any points gained through business to be used for business, which is fine. Minor point on page 124. We mentioned elected members in section 7.4. Is that relevant in the management policy? If you look at the third paragraph from the bottom, the main issue associated with council's use of private assets is the risk of the council paying or reimbursing amounts that improperly benefit elected member or staff member. Is it relevant to have elected members there?
I didn't hear the second half of your question there.
Oh, sorry, it's under section 7.4, council use of private assets. It mentions elected members, but this is a management policy, so I just wondered why elected members were being mentioned here, and perhaps if it's meant to cover everybody, why they aren't mentioned elsewhere. And I just wanted to raise that as probably a really minor point. Page 124.
7.2.
It's 7.4. Are they in 7.2 as well?
Yeah.
Okay, so just checking this is a management policy, why we've got elected members here.
So that's a point to take away.
Yeah, I think
it's a point to take away. We have a elected members support policy which covers what they are and are not entitled to remuneration or reimbursement of. I'll check with the team. I suppose it's in here because we've, just to clarify that sensitive expenditure is something that needs to be considered when we're looking at payments to anyone.
Yeah, but Bruce
or any
is right. The
reimbursement.
scope of the policy does state it's for council staff. It doesn't include elected
Yeah, I
members.
didn't have too much. It's a good
Need
policy
to-
for elected members as well, if you think about it in terms of sensitive expenditure. So I wouldn't have had too much trouble. I just think it just needs some clarity. That was all. Thank you. Thanks for that, Karen.
Okay. No further feedback on that. I've just got a question on the policy library. So you've highlighted that with the red, amber, green. Thank you. I guess my question is, what is the plan to get those reviews up to date, given current resourcing constraints?
Just one moment, I'm just opening the document where I've got my notes on. On that, so there's a few policies that are awaiting prioritisation, but essentially what the teams are doing are they're prioritising work that's required for legislative compliance. So internal policies they look at, and where there's not necessarily a risk or an immediate issue with the review, then they're simply having to prioritise other work.
Okay, so you are prioritising that legislative compliance.
Yeah. So
and presumably quick wins.
Yeah. When Francis and my team looks at this with the organisation, it's really what's legislatively required, and that gets prioritised first. And then if there's immediate issues with a policy that it needs to be reviewed, or if it's otherwise got benefits to the business, and that comes up to the front as well.
Okay.
But otherwise, it's unfortunately something that the organisation is just managing at the moment, depending on staff availability and resources.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you. There aren't any further questions on that report. The recommendation at page 113 is that the committee receives the report and notes any feedback and any recommendations to councils on council sensitive expenditure policy. I'll move that. Can I have a seconder? Thank you, Councillor Mark. All of those in favour? Against? Carried. Thank you. Right, let's loop back to item 11 on page 103. And I'll welcome Audit New Zealand and Tracy to the table. Welcome, Clarence.
Morning.
Good morning, everybody. So this morning what we're presenting to you is the 2021-22 audit plan for the annual report. You would have noted that the report was a late attachment. So what Clarence and the team and myself and my team have been trying to do is work on the timing of this particular audit, which hasn't been easy for either of us. So just a couple of things to note, apart from on the timing, which I'll talk about in a minute, is just some of the key points in the audit plan of what Audit New Zealand will be looking at. So obviously revaluations, which, as you know, I've been talking about quite a lot all through the annual plan meetings. So all of our waters assets were revalued, so the team will be looking at that. Obviously WIP, as always. And then the other one that you would have noted in the plan is our SaaS. So what that is software as a service. So there has been a change, and you'll also note that's in the next report that I'll be talking to you about today in our accounting treatment review as well. So I'm not sure, Chair Kieran, if you want me to talk about that now or in the next one.
Let's to the next
Great,
paper.
I'm happy to do that. So just so the final thing is I guess the timing and what will happen from a logistical point of view. So as we discussed at the last committee, what we will need is obviously a recommendation from this committee to go to our council, and then the council will be writing a letter of recommendation to the new incoming council, because we won't have completed the annual report on that by that time. So the trick that I've got at the moment is to figure out when I can do those meetings. The last official council meeting is the 22nd of September. So we are looking at potentially doing an extraordinary SHRAC meeting and an extraordinary council meeting that following week. But that's very dependent on where we are and if we are able to get a verbal clearance, even with some caveats at that point in time. So we will know, obviously, once we get started, what that looks like. And we will be. So just a bit of a heads up, I guess, that's the draft plan at the moment. But as you know, last year it felt like it changed every week. But as always, I will keep you in the loop with that.
Okay, so can I just clarify that timetable? Oh, no, actually, before I do that, I'll hand over to you, Clarence. Is there anything further that you would like to add?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Yes, the only thing that I want to add is on the significant risks, we also identified the fair value assessment, and this year we'll do a fair value assessment for roading, and with what's happening with the oil prices and that, there may be some material movements in that, so my recommendation would be just to have a look at that fair value assessment quite early on, so if the full revaluation is required, that there's time to actually perform that. And then I also took the opportunity just to bring the full team along. So I've got, you'll see in the audit plan, I have a second manager on this audit as well. It's just to give Nadir some time to focus on some of his other audits running at the same time. So Kay is the new second manager, and then I brought Matt along, which will be the assistant manager, also changed from the previous year when you used to be the assistant manager. So those were the big changes on our team, and I think it will hopefully help us to perform this audit within the agreed time frames, and that is the aim. But as Trace has highlighted, that is all subject to potentially to change. But if that happens, we will definitely be discussing that with management and yourself.
Okay, thank you. So there are two members with questions, but just before I go to those, can I just clarify the timetable, and noting your comments, Tracy, that you are still trying to work through this. So these dates are correct, that the final audit field work will begin on the 12th of September? Mm-hmm. So that's after our ARC workshop, so yes. That workshop presumably will be rescheduled?
Correct.
Okay. Yes. And then we had an ARC meeting scheduled for the 13th of the 9th, but you're looking to put that back as well, are you, Tracy?
Yeah, so that's, so the latest date I can do the final council meeting is the 30th of September, so it's working backwards from that and obviously allowing time for the verbal clearance to come in and having the SHRAC meeting. So like we did last time, we did a back-to-back. Yeah. So that's very much also dependent obviously on being able to have the extraordinary council meeting at that latest time as well.
Okay.
So very much in draft at the moment.
Yes, right. And my note was that there was quite some time between the ARC meeting and verbal clearance, but actually that gap may be shortened anyway. But it will be inevitable, it sounds, that there'll be quite some time between the committee's review and effective recommendation and the annual report being signed off by the new council. So we risk, obviously, subsequent events in between, but it seems unavoidable this year, unfortunately. Right, Councillor Dave, you've got a question.
Thanks. Just to prove that I'm still here and awake.
And audit is your favourite topic.
Yeah, I was going to say. You've got a question.
Yeah, I have. And on page 152, and I've read every single page before that. Look, on the revaluation issue, or that this happened, so I'm not sure, one of you, I guess, thinking about what's happening with land values now, because this includes land values where they are going backwards at the moment. In fact, I saw an article in the last day or so that said basically the last 12 months worth of increases have sort of been wiped out on average. Does this mean that we should be looking at a sort of an interim estimate of revaluation, perhaps downwards, of the land? The reason I'm asking that is because the question of the valuation of the Three Waters assets is shortly going to become potentially quite important, and we should at least maybe know the answers to that, even if we don't publish it, because the government sure as hell is not going to offer more to us than they think it's worth, I wouldn't have thought.
No, that's right. And a really great question. So we actually do land and buildings, and I think for the last 4 or 5 years, every year. just because of the nature of Hamilton City and the way it grows. So the movement in those spaces, it's just something that we've just done automatically every single year. So we've already done that one for this year as well as on top of those two, we did all of the waters revaluations. This particular one, which is what Bruce was adhering to a little bit earlier, while I haven't done a formal revaluation on the transport assets this year, we will have to do, I guess, a little calculation to figure out what we already hold compared to those values based on the changes, and then see where we're at. And obviously the threshold of that means we're either very quickly going to have to do another revaluation, or it will come under the materiality threshold. So, and that I'm not going to know for another couple of weeks.
Okay.
So,
yeah, because I mean, if we say here's our asset valuation for the stuff that you're taking on board, and they say actually we're discounting that by 20%, which might be applying some national average or something to it, we would want to make sure that we weren't being sold short locally,
yeah. And my team's prepared to actually do a whole another revaluation on all of our water assets again next year, just with obviously this in the pipeline. It seems the right thing to do, so definitely.
Sure, thanks.
Okay, Councillor Rob.
Yeah, thanks. And thanks for being here today, Clarence. Just in terms of the extended timetable for the 2022 audit, is that a resourcing issue from your perspective, or is it issues that are going to require additional work for Audit New Zealand to do specifically for Hamilton? Or some other reason, perhaps?
So no, the reason for the delay is our resourcing on our side. We haven't started any of the real planning or anything. That's why the audit plan is still in draft. We're still pretty much doing 21 audits. The plan is to have them all done by the end of, well, May. It was May, now it's the end of June, so that we can start and all focus on the 22 audits. There's obviously a big focus on revaluations, which means that because of all the uncertainty, that we do spend a lot of time on the revaluations, making sure that the assumptions and the unit rates feeding into those revaluations actually make sense. And on that previous question as well, we do look at the sustainability, or is it normally in the valuation reports, the valuers do conclude to say if it's just a spike in movements, or if it's they think that this is the right valuation going forward as well. So they do factor those things into consideration. But yes, so the short answer is the resourcing on our side, and that's why we have to try and juggle 2 or 3 audits at the same time, giving requests and then having enough time to get those requests back and not sitting on site waiting for it. So that's why sometimes it is a bit longer process to get it done.
So is there anything that management can do? And I noticed about the substantive testing. Is there anything that management can do to try and reduce the amount of substantive testing without you giving away any of the secrets or the reasons for that work to sort of bring? Because I'm a little bit concerned that the timetable currently extends beyond the term of this council, and that the final sign-off, if you like, is going to be undertaken by what might be which will be a new council, but may have different personnel sitting around that table.
So there's nothing specific that we can do in advance. What we'll try and do is to get the samples that we want to test to management quite early in the audit, so that they have time to actually get all the information for us. Also on the non-financial reporting, it's in the audit plan, the ones that we'll be looking at. And again, to save time, make sure that those populations are actually accurate and complete, so that we don't find any errors, because that takes a lot of time when you start to find errors in your samples, because that means either extending the sample or taking a new sample or qualification potentially, and you don't want to end up in that position. So normally when there's when we pick up issues in the audit, that's where there's pressure on the timelines. or any technical things like the software as a service, because again, it's a lot of judgments going into that. And the accounting standards nowadays is full of judgments. Management has to apply a lot of judgments, and we have to audit those judgments and making sure that we agree with that. And that takes more time than when it was cash accounting, where you could actually just follow the
Cash accounting? Goodness me. That,
Okay.
okay.
If I may, Councillor Pascoe, I also just to put in mind that I also have two ex-auditors in my team that just about pre-audit the audit before it gets to these guys as well. So so that actually does help in the sense that they obviously know what's expected and what to look for, and they work very closely with the team. So
Thank you.
Okay.
Thanks, Chair.
Bruce.
Thank you. Look, and probably the conversation has really dealt with probably most of really my key point. The only thing I wanted to note, wanted some assurance for here is in some sense clearance around capability. And by the way, great to see your team here. Thanks for bringing them along. It's really superb. I noticed under the SAS you just said, look, this could be a challenging process. So I think what I'm really just trying to get some assurance on, that actually there's a good chance that we can clear these as individual issues even prior to the audit starting.
That is the plan, yes.
Good.
Definitely.
Yeah, which I think is going back to your point, Rob, because if I understand it correctly from what I've heard elsewhere, for instance, revaluations are big. You've got a specialist team that are dealing with the revaluations. Again, good for us to know how that fits in with the audit program, which would be really important. So, Rob, we're no different to any other than two other local authorities in the country. There are only two being signed off before the elections.
Thank you.
As I understand it.
Okay, and Clarence, am I right in understanding from your report that you're expecting an emphasis of matter with regards to the 3 water reform disclosures?
Most probably, but that will come through our local government sector group. It's just so if there is any further changes that will happen, it will have a major impact on your balance sheet, so it will make sense to draw the reader's attention to that. So okay. My gut feel tells me that will be yes. And
can I assume that the CCO 2021 audits are now complete?
Not 100% as far as I understand. You'll see in the audit plan that we've made a different assessment that the Waikato Regional Airport Limited may be a significant component. That is still under discussion, and we're just working with our methodology team because it is accounted for as an associate and not as a subsidiary. But we expect quite big movements in the investment property, which goes through your profit and loss, and therefore that may have a significant impact on the group's financial statements. If that is the case, like it was in 21, then we'll have to do some specific work on the revaluation of the investment property in the airport. And that's why it's there. I think at the moment it says the Waikato Group, the airport group, but we'll change that to just include the Waikato Airport Limited, seeing that that's where the investment property sits.
Okay, and with regards to 2021 audits, when will they be complete?
I think the plan is to have it done by the end of June.
Right.
Yep. I know that the audit is at the moment is being undertaken. Let me just go. They're busy with reporting.
Right. Okay. Look, I don't think there's any further questions on that paper, so the recommendation is that the committee receives the report. I'll move that. Thank you, Councillor Rob, for seconding. All of those in favour? Against? Carried. Thank you, Clarence. And Tracy, you'll stay with us for your year-end accounting treatment review paper.
Thank you, I will. So just a few things that we've just highlighted that we will obviously be doing to put into the annual report. So the usual landfill provisions, weather type provisions and contingencies. We've obviously just talked about the revaluations as well. So the biggest change this year for us is what they're calling SaaS and how we treat SaaS. So SaaS is basically software as a service, and the key to this is whether or not we own that intangible asset or whether or not the vendor the vendor that we've bought it off owns it as well. So we've actually got quite a few of those particular projects on the go at the moment.
And Tracy, can I just interrupt there and just clarify that that's with regards to customisation costs?
It's the key wording is around ownership, and then the next stage after that is getting into the nitty-gritty of customisations and how much we've done to make it work with other systems and things like that. So that in itself, as you just highlighted, is why this is quite a substantial piece of work that my team and Murray's team have been working through. This has been part of the accounting standards for companies and other entities for the last couple of years, hasn't it? Yeah, a few years, but it hasn't been for PBE, so for local authorities. It's only just come to our attention at the beginning of this year that this is potentially going to be a thing, and obviously in the last couple of months it's now very much a thing as far as us having to review it and figure out what we're going to do with it. So to your point before, Bruce, what we've been doing is trying to work with Auckland Council, for example, who have just been through this piece of work and figure out what they do. So what we're trying to do the audit team coming in is pretty much decide what we're going to do, how we're going to treat it, how much has to be dropped out into our profit and loss statement and how much will remain as an intangible asset. That paper that we will write basically via Audit New Zealand goes down to their technical team and then they'll review and decide whether or not they agree with how we've treated it. So we're working on that now and trying to get that done before Audit New Zealand arrive. And again, basing it on what Auckland Council have already done, because I've just been through that piece of work, and working with Tauranga as well, because they will have the same thing, just not as material as what we potentially will have. So that probably from an accounting treatment point of view is our biggest piece of work of any accounting standards and changes that we're doing this year.
And do you have any idea of the potential impact at this stage?
Yep, millions.
Right.
Yep.
Yep. And do you intend to seek external expertise on that as well as consulting with Auckland, or you're yet to establish whether you need further support?
Yeah, I think we've got it. We've been doing it for the last couple of months in quite a lot of detail. So as I mentioned, someone in Murray's team who works in IS but is also an accountant has been working with us with my ex-auditor that happens to be working in my team as well. So, and they have been also just liaising with Audit New Zealand around any guidance that they can give us coming out of their technical team ahead of that, and then basing it on obviously what Auckland have done. So I'm pretty comfortable that it's going to be what it's going to be, and that we've got quite a thorough list of things and checks and balances based on it. But as you know, Clarence mentioned before, a lot of it's just open to management interpretation. So it's just how well we can convince them that the decisions that we've made are the right decisions, and just kind of have to be guided, I guess. It is because it's so new. There's a whole lot of unknowns, I guess, and even ourselves when we've got around the table, what each of us thinks is ever so slightly different. So yeah, it's a tricky one.
Okay. Bruce, did you have some other questions?
And thank you for that question, Karen, because I think it's actually a really real one, and I like what you're doing, and that's why I say it'll take the auditors time to get it through, particularly their opinion committee or a technical team. Probably in a similar vein, I notice our evaluations are at 30 April. Mm-hmm. Do we have to prove to them that there has been no material movement in the last 3 months of the year?
Well, that's a good question. I don't think so, because it was them that told us to do it at the 30th of April.
Okay, I'd be wary, not because I distrust that advice. Yep. I'm concerned that last year, in the period of rapid rising inflation, councils that were later in the sign-off process got caught.
Right.
Needing to revalue.
Okay. That makes sense.
Even though it was after balance date.
Okay.
I think I might have raised this with you. We were lucky because we went on a December one last time round. So look, can I just suggest that actually, given perhaps you haven't given me a direct, a yes or no answer, I think we should just check out that we have, this is my point about the the issues. Do we know all what their tests are? And I would like us to be sure we don't have to do, in effect, some level of fair value at 30 June, that there hasn't been a material movement.
Yeah, so on the 30th of June we do, which is to Councillor McPherson's point before around the transport. So with all of the categories, we redo that little calculation. So I already do that in December, and then I have to do it on the 30th of June specifically. But yeah.
Okay, worth the check.
Thank you.
Appreciate that.
I appreciate that.
Councillor Rob.
Yeah, thank you. The software dilemma or write-off, that's a timing difference, isn't it? It would have been expensed anyway, but over a longer period, is that?
Yes, so intangible assets get amortised, so they get amortised over the life of us keeping those assets. So the challenge that we've got is figuring out, so there's probably 3 different areas that we're thinking. So one is it still a capital asset that can be amortised over a longer period of time? The next one is potentially doing it as a prepayment, because we've obviously paid the vendor and we still have licences to access that software again over a period of time. That probably is a little bit shorter than what we would have done if it was capital. And then your third option is actually we've got no ownership, and all of those costs have to go straight to the P&L. So that's with all of the projects, which unfortunately we've done quite a few big ones this year. That's what the criteria that we're kind of working through at the moment, and trying to figure out what falls into each of those sorts of areas.
So I take it that there's no sort of publications around from the big accounting firms or from Audit New Zealand as to, given that it's been in the private sector for a year or two, there's no sort of guidelines, if you like, that, I know the big accounting firms do put out guidelines on these things, and so as auditors and accounting firms, as well as I don't see anything in the audit office publications about, what their level of tolerance is. I assume, is there information in the public space that we can use to try and potentially, I'm going to use the word argue with the audit office, but to negotiate, if you like, with the audit office in terms of what we think would be the preferred treatment?
Yes, there is, but again, that's what's very much open to interpretation, and what we define as ownership, and what making it used for our existing systems and things like that. So, and like I said, because it's such a new thing, I remember when we first went into the cloud at a previous role. There was, so many different ways, and it took a long time for everyone to settle on actually a really defined definition. So what we're going to do is essentially what Auckland Council have done, is define it ourselves as part of our accounting policy, and what we're going to treat it as, and then obviously that's what audit should look at, is what's in your policy and then how you're treating it, and making sure those two match. The risk that we have is that they will disagree with how we've then gone and made some of those accounting assumptions. But I get the feeling that it's, from the technical team's perspective, if we have a good story, I guess, if you like, to go with it, then that's all we can do, and that's all they're asking us to do.
We both have resource issues, don't we? And, you could make a War and Peace novel out of it. Yeah. Okay, thank you.
I think also on this topic, it's substance over form. So if we've spent a bit of money internally developing a customisation that only we can use, that bridges a piece of software that we're licensing with our internal systems, and we can demonstrate that it's not just a homogenous piece of software that can be used by anybody, then it helps us to define the level of ownership that we have and control that we have over that piece of software. So that's what Tracy's saying in terms of the detail, devil's in the detail in terms of the types of work we've done.
Okay, so Tracy, we'll use this time now to discuss the earlier question regarding climate change reporting and I guess more holistic reporting generally. So can you discuss with us what is the plan for the more holistic reporting within the annual plan, and how does that dovetail into the separate climate reporting?
So as Sean mentioned, I'm not sure if he's still online, but the plan obviously was to have a separate report for climate change. But listening to the committee today, I mean, there's no reason why we couldn't dovetail it into the actual annual report itself and have a whole section on that. I'm certainly not opposed to it. It was going to be done anyway. On the non-financial service performance indicators, we obviously have quite a few in there on climate change anyway, which again, Audit New Zealand have identified that they will be reviewing and keeping a close eye on those particular ones as well. So again, if that is what the committee would like us to do, then I certainly don't see any problem with that.
I know that it would certainly be my preference to give the readers of the accounts that more what I call holistic reporting, but the non-financial measures that they're most interested in.
Yep.
And climate change is the first, but you know, there are many other ESG issues that our stakeholders are of course interested in. And I'm interested in comments from the rest of the committee on that matter.
Kieran, look, not an expert, so I should be very careful what I say here, other than you've already mentioned Auckland anyway. Talk to Auckland. I mean, there is coming out of the Institute, or the XRB, now appropriate reporting around our environmental reporting. In the case of, and so I think Sean was going down the right track when he said there's a separate report. I'm not saying it shouldn't also be integrated, but actually a separate report with indeed, dare I say it, in the case of Auckland, an independent review of that.
Okay, sure.
And that's included within the annual report. And I think this is clearly the way I guess the accounting and the reporting profession is moving. So I'd just like to suggest that, Karen, that there would be a darn good resource to start up. But that's now backed by what the XRB is starting to bring out as well.
Sure. Thank you.
So presumably reporting will be based on the XRB or the TC.
That's it. I wanted to use that acronym, but I could not remember what the full acronym is. But I mean, essentially, it's that is what Auckland has adopted, and I'm making some plug that we should probably ultimately consider that. I'm not suggesting necessarily for the annual report, by the way.
No.
I think
What was that second one you said?
It's the Task Force for Climate Disclosures.
Oh, okay,
so
right.
TFCD, I always get them around the wrong way.
You're right, TFCD.
Okay, cool. Thank you.
Any other feedback or comments on that item from the committee? No. Okay, well, if there aren't any further questions on that paper, the recommendation is that that committee receives the paper. I'll move that. Can I have a seconder, please? Thank you. Mangai, Jaylene. All of those in favour? Against? Carried. So that brings us to the resolution to exclude the public, and that is on page 148. Thank you. Seconder, thank you. Councillor Maxine, all of those in favour? Against? Carried. Right, I suggest that we have a 5-minute break and then get into the public excluded paper. But I think at least Councillor Maxine, you're due to go. What time are you due to go, Councillor Mark? 12:30. 12:30, great. Okay, so we'll reconvene at 2:55. And you'll stop the live feed.
Are you finding it, Kieran?